I'm going to say some words tonight about reasons, not reason, not the singular, not the great old clinical world of so-called yellow circuit logic, not linear directions of inference, elation, even, God forbid, conclusions, but speaking in the plural of reasons. First, let me point out that it is only in the confines and the limits of the 3D world of the city that reasons exist. It is only there that things follow, that there are reasons for what happened. But I would like to point out to you from another unexpected direction that reasons are a city excuse for not using misdirection and deception. Of course, they don't look at it that way, but it takes up the slack wherein they should be using. I say should be, of course, if they were all involved with the revolution. That they would be using misdirection and deception, the two, count them, the two great teaching aids. But since they do not, since they're not aware of it, since it's not their job, then in the city, the basis of what appears to be instruction, the conveyance of information, the apparent expansion of yellow circuit storehouse of knowledge is based upon a very, very poor excuse known as reasons. This produces in the city, and this produces in city consciousness, what amounts to a collapsible world. It continually falls in on itself, it continually turns on itself, it continually, and not as expeditiously or informative or as entertaining or artistic as the good old Far Eastern idea of the snake swallowing his tail and trying to assume that represents eternity or the eternal flow of human nature or knowledge. When it actually turns on itself, you have got the situation wherein there seems to be a continuing expectation that something is going to happen, that new information, some conclusions are going to be forthcoming based upon what I understand, what you understand, what humanity understands, and it continually does what from another view? It collapses. Nobody notices, because the way it appears, even though they of course don't use this terminology either, but it appears that a new triad took place. Apparently something has shifted in the city. Apparently the general view of some subject, the theory involved with some area, seems to have undergone some alteration. But I tell you, a better description is, from the Bush view, the world collapsed. It went as far as it could on the shaky ground of reason, and the world of reason always produces a collapsible world. If this is not clear enough, which would of course be a shock to one and all, let me give you an EG. I don't have the EG equipment, so we'll have to fake it. My excursions are a prime example, I suggest to you, of activity in which, from my view of course, I wouldn't give these excursions out to the public, it serves no purpose. But from your view, you should be able to see what I'm about to point at, that it is folly to look for the reasons. Folly, 4D folly, not ordinary folly, but real exceptional folly. Now, from the beginning, I have tried to discourage looking for specific reasons, and I have even tried to deceive you and misdirect you even more by saying, don't think about this particular one, or just keep your eyes open, just do it. And then sometimes I'd say, do it, and then send in a report based upon this. And then I would set up the standards, or I would set up the signpost of what the report was. And no one has ever mentioned this to me, that the reports were never quite symmetrical as to what an ordinary person should have once they heard the excursion, about what we're going to do, that, oh, well, this obviously, the reason for this has to be to make me see so-and-so, to make it clear that such and such is true in life. But then the times I did say, as opposed to, well, don't think about it, just do it and keep your eyes open, at times I said, write me some kind of report on this basis. If you'd been listening in a certain way, the way I asked for the report stepped all over the toes of what seemed to be the reasons for undertaking the excursion in the first place, or for me thinking it up. That there had to be, obviously, potential psychological lessons here to be learned. If you actually look for the reasons, if you believe that you found reasons, if you believe that you saw reasons, you had part of that excursion collapse on you and you just didn't notice it. It wasn't as heavy and as massive as dirt, and so you did not suffocate. Anything that you investigate, anything that you attempt to study, and you see that is based upon a line of reasons. Remember, I'm not talking about reason, not logic, not apparent, ordinary basic operations of yellow circuits, but that what happens, what you think you're seeing, is based upon reasons of something that you've already seen, or something that's already been well established, or something that is just commonsensically true. That's the reasons for this present elation, or conclusion, inference. A world of reasons implies, without any doubt, that we're talking about straight line phenomenon. And if we're talking about that, we're talking about predictable limits and predictable outcome. Trust me. And if that be true, how can you expect new information? Well, you can, for very good reasons. Because you're fucking ordinary if you do. All right, if that's still not clear enough, which of course I'd be amazed, but let me try and carry it to a place that may snap a few of you. Let's try it in this way. Real actions, and by that I mean usable actions. That is, they seem to be, they appear to be somehow self-motivated, and somehow, some way, under some of your control. That's the way it appears. That's what I mean by real actions. Real actions are not dependent upon, nor are they based upon, reasons. Contraire. It is unsatisfactory actions that demand a thoughtful, wordy inquiry into the background of the reasons that cause the failure. That wasn't too complex, was it? Actions that apparently succeed, real actions. No one, even the city, questions the reasons. The only time the investigation, the only time the concern about the reasons involved, the only time the Blue Ribbon Committee gets appointed is when the actions were less than satisfactory. Nay, may I say it, some degree of failure involved. Then, and only then, is the demand made that we investigate the reasons for the failure. That's not proof enough. This is true, happenstance, serendipity, Great Falls, Minnesota. This is true externally. Nobody investigates the reasons. Nobody has interest in the reasons. If life, in its strange, peculiar way, well, you shouldn't actually talk like that, because life is no more strange or peculiar than you are, to say the least. But even out there, even if life in some way went I wonder what's the reasons for this. It's such an unexpected boon, such an unexpected success. And life causes some little human somewhere to say that. It's almost as though the rest of the world en masse goes. Because it turns out, in what appears to be out there, there is no interest in the reasons behind success, successful actions. Successful actions, remember how I started this, this is not some kind of psychological game going on in the city. Real actions, usable actions, actions that some group of humans apparently seem to have had some control over. Looked at from another viewpoint, it is actions that continue for such a length of time that it's obvious that life is benefiting from it. Such actions are not based upon, they are not dependent upon this collapsible, shaky world of reasons. And I was trying to show you in an oblique way part of the proof, if you got to have it, and that is that nobody, which means life, nobody out there has any interest, nobody makes any demands, nobody investigates it, nobody discusses it. When it succeeds, when the actions are real, when they are successful, the question of reasons does not arise. But as soon as some segment, or even an individual that seems to have that much influence, undertakes some actions and they, based upon the proclaimed intention, they seem to fail based upon some group of people's expectations, the actions collapse. Then, and only then, do people want to discuss, does life want to hear a discussion, an inquiry, an investigation into the reasons in the background that would give us some indication as to the cause of the failure. Now, if you were my kind of friend and could listen with a third ear, that by itself would just about take all the wind out of your sails, or take all the taste out of your mouth for the whole idea of reasons. Once you see it, that's true. Once you see that, I'm not talking about out there. Oh, hell yeah, I was talking about out there, but now we're talking about in here. There is nothing wired up in you that has any interest in the reasons for success. Or if you can see the connection, as Kyroot was pointing out tonight, once you become king, you don't have to worry about no kind of damn fancy ancestors. You don't have to keep up that old thing of trying to pull out some kind of scroll showing where you came from. And once you take power, nobody gives a damn. All interest in, I wonder what his lineage is. It's gone. The same thing when you find something that seems to be successful for you, that you apparently can live up to some expectation you had. You never, that's spelled N-E-V, you know what. You never have an inquiry internally. You never go, gee, I wonder what's the reason for me succeeding. I wonder what's the reasons for me undertaking an action that for a change actually did succeed. I wonder what are the reasons for me suddenly meeting some expectations that I seem to have had. Never, 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 never. You just don't do it. But if you note, at the level of city consciousness, a large part of one's yellow circuit time is spent up in what appears to be an internal congressional investigation, a blue ribbon panel pondering, talking, chattering about the reasons in the background of your failures. What else do you talk about? What else does the mind talk about? The daydreams in the city. And yet I point out again, it's open to your investigation immediately at any time. There is no such interest, there is no such inquiry into the so-called reasons behind real action, satisfactory action, usable actions, which could bring us to our slogan for the week. Now, even for a slogan box, I got to point out to you, truer words were never spoken. If we were doing the boxes in stereo, I'd have another one over here that after you had that one would say, reasons aren't anything. Let me try to say a few more things about it, because I am missing a lot of people. All ordinary activity in life, everything that you individually, whoever you are wired up to think, to feel, individually, and then these collective groups of people known as nations, neighborhoods, ghettos, races, religions, and all that. Everything that seems to be natural, expected, almost automatic in the life of man seems to have reasons. And I say seems to. Ordinary consciousness could not conceive of, were I to try to mention to somebody, of doing something sans reasons. Not insane, not without reason, singular, but to do something without reasons. And so then they would immediately, since their yellow circuit's got to pay the rent some way, pay its way, would immediately go, wait a minute, no reasons. You mean I'm going to do something that I've got no motivation for? Ha ha, how silly. You mean I'm going to do something, let me say reasons, not reason. Okay, all right. But you're saying that somebody could do something, and let's see, am I going to stand here and try to think up more synonyms for motivation? No purpose. I got no reasons to do something. You're saying that somebody could operate like that. I guess we would safely say that would be a hard position to defend in the city. That is based upon this assumption. Regardless of the voices that some of you can begin to just barely discern at the cellular level, but it is based upon the wired-in assumption that consciousness operates in a linear manner in time to precede action. That there are reasons for what I do. And some of you, I have run close enough to a great cosmic ringer, and some of you stuck your own finger in it for a few times and have seen it, and you have actually realized. As I put it, some of you can now quote me, or some of you now forget where you got it, which is fine. If you see it, I just soon you forget it. But some of you now you've had glimpses of this fact, that in the city, consciousness is the last to know, which is without reasons. In fact, that is worse in the city. It is without reason, because it is the extreme example of lack of reason. The yellow circuits can hear that, and they hear exactly what's being said. Well, you're saying consciousness, and you mean me. You're saying we're the last to know. And yellow circuits go. And yellow circuits tell the truth. Oh, all right, they tell the truth as they know it, which is fine for the city. They tell the truth and they say, no, no, no. It could not be. That could not be true, or you could not have even said that sentence. That could not be, or I could not comprehend the sentence. I could not respond to it. There is some linear process here, and we have got to start in the distinguishing characteristic of us Homo sapiens. Consciousness. So reasons. Of course, in the city they may say the reasons might be spurious, fallacious, they may prove to be ill-founded, but reasons precede action. As I pointed out, some of you, on a good warm day, know better. On the cellular level, everybody knows better. But at the cellular level, humans have only reached the level of it being necessary to translate cellular voices into just several things. You know, hungry, hungry, horny, horny, get out of my way, get out of my space. Other than that, the cellular voices have yet, I guess I could push it, but they have actually yet to be translated much more than maybe those 4 words, 5 words. Move, fuck, hungry. That is literally about it. And that's all that's been necessary. And basically that is the level, from one view, as far as reasons, motivation goes, that drive people in the city, from the Pope to the president to the local bricklayer to your mother and father. That is about it. What I mentioned already in passing, but let me say a little more specifically, that a great teaching aid, an unrecognized teaching aid, would be deception. Now, an even better one is misdirection. Now, the two together are just supreme. They are sans parallel. They are teaching aids. What are teaching aids? My excursions, and to say the very least, a lot of what I stand here and say on the nights that we tape these are either, if not misdirection, if not deception, absolute misdirection. But it could not be otherwise. If it was otherwise, this would all be based upon a lineal, acceptable line of reasons. And I would have to start off with reasons that, let us say, to simplify it, that us in general, between the performer and the audience, we would have to start off on some premise that everyone could agree on, whatever it was. Such as, all right, I'm talking right now and you're listening. So everybody says, yeah. Well, see, you're right there, you're just off to a wrong start. I mean, after that, it's worse than downhill. But it would have to start off on the basis that we could move from that assumption based upon a continuing series of reasons. That is the only way that ordinary information gets conveyed in the city. That's the only way the ordinary consciousness works. That's the way it's supposed to work. It's efficient. It serves the purposes of the city. You cannot get new information without using the aids of deception. I'm not trying to be pseudo-mystical, but I simply point out there shouldn't be any secret, and the word is not correct, but it's as good as any. That everything I talk about, to some degree, is deception. It is not literally true. It's not all allegory. But it is deception. And the parts that are not deception are misdirection. That is the only way this can be done. It's always at the time that this is done, on whether it's a small scale or a larger scale, throughout history, that's always what's involved at the time. Now, history has this way of shaving off some of the sharp edges that, if it's going to be remembered, some kind of activity like this in the past, if it's going to get remembered, give it a few generations maybe, and it sinks into the general history books or memory of some group of people is later going to cellularly put it into books, and it becomes less revolutionary. It becomes less dramatic. It becomes less misdirective. given enough time, and insanity sounds okay. Given enough time, and the most radical of ideas become the most conservative. The thing with deception and misdirection, though, ultimately is this, is you have got to learn how to use it as your own form of self-instruction. Without it, you can't do anything. Without it, you go in circles forever, as you're supposed to. Without it, you can't decide, well, do I want to change? But wait a minute, if everything that I wanted to do before I started this was mechanical and wired into me, then the desire to want to change is. And so therefore I'll get nowhere. What if everything is an illusion? But if that's true, then my belief that everything is an illusion would likewise have to be an illusion. Da-da-da-da-da. You can't get anywhere. And as you insist that I point out to you continually, you had all those years before you run across me to figure that out, or to be prepared for somebody that knows something, such as me, to go ahead and point out to you that, hey, you've had all this time that didn't get you anywhere, and you're supposed to, but now go, damn, you're right, and I'd be done with that part. But you have got to then learn how to use deception on yourself. I know how strange that sounds, but think how strange it sounds when I used to tell you, when I first told you that you have to operate most efficiently, you should not tell yourself what you're doing. That, for instance, if you're going to try to stop something, you're going to try to alter some habit you had, that by all means do not tell yourself, much less anybody else, but don't even tell yourself, all right, I've been drinking too much coffee. Well, as a matter of fact, I don't like the effect, or just for the hell of it, I'm going to quit drinking coffee of any kind. Even decaf. I'm just not going to drink coffee. It's just become a habit. That is not the way to do it. Think how strange that sounded when I first told you. Is go ahead and do it, but do not tell yourself. Now the words will form, but it's like noise behind the door. Just refuse to listen. And you can stop the sentence before it actually imprints itself on the screen of consciousness. You know what you wanted to say. You know what the yellow circuits were going to say, that, all right, we're going to quit, but don't do it. You do not decide to quit, not in words, and you don't say to you, well, I'm going to quit. It's not. There is no real description, but it's almost as though you put the whole matter, this is not it, but it's better than saying that I quit. It's better than me saying that it's not that even. But it's like you put the whole thing in limbo. And I don't mean the dance. As you put it all in suspended animation. You put it all in a state of continual expectation. Like you and the habit and the voice that wants to talk about it. Nobody actually knows what's going on. There is the power in it. But if you ever say, well, I'm going to quit drinking coffee. I'm just going to quit. Yeah, right. Sure you are. I'm going to change. You got it. You got no power whatsoever. You got no chance of changing. But if you decide to do something and then you won't tell yourself, you have got power. Nobody can deal with that kind of secrecy. The circuits cannot deal in the ordinary world of oppositions. In the binary dance, it cannot properly confront you. It cannot properly oppose you because you're not even saying what you're doing. It wants to talk about, well, why we can't, or it'll make you nervous, or what's the use? And you don't answer. You don't even say, well, there may not be a use. You don't respond at all. And I'm, of course, putting words on this and makes it sound sort of psychological, and it's not. It's just the way it appears. But it's almost then as though the habit is made more and more foolish. It is rendered, in a sense, impotent through a continual babbling. It continues to try and get ready to fight or oppose you, and it's like a real position of superiority. Not to anybody else in the world. They're not even cheap and tacky enough to deserve this kind of opposition. It's to yourself that it's prepared about why we can't do this. I've been drinking coffee too long. I like it too much. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter what it says. That's a real position of superiority, that it knows it's trying to deal with you, and all you do is look at it. And you won't oppose it whatsoever. You don't even, what they call it in the movies, you don't even dignify its whining by any response. When it says, well, we can't quit, we'll have to taper off. And you're supposed to respond like, well, that's a good idea. I'll just cut my consumption in half. I'll go from there. I'll just start drinking half as much. Do not respond. If you do, you have given up power. The king does not deal with peasants. Now, if he's going to be a real king, you got no power if you're going to deal with trash and common people. It's none of their goddamn business what you're doing. It's only people in the city that believe, well, everybody needs to know my business. It's only the bourgeoisie that believe that their neighbor has the right to come over and come in your house anytime you want to and say, hello, Charlie, Mary. You don't do that to a king. And the only way you become a king is you don't put up with that kind of common treatment. You're not that familiar with trash. But if you get down and talk to them, then those people feel quite at home. They feel well within their right to just suddenly barge in your house anytime you want to. And to say, oh, are you still drinking coffee? Oh, I thought you were going to cut down coffee. What kind of coffee you got? And they'll look in your drawers, and then they'll open your cabinet doors, they'll open your little brain, and they'll look in there and they wonder what's going on. If you allow yourself to have that kind of social intercourse with common people, with trash, then you got no self-respect on a real sense, on a real level. There is no mystery. There is no power, and you cannot control what's going on. I didn't plan to go into this in the great external allegorical to any great degree, but let me just point out, people should know that. That's what I'm hanging around the edges. Let's jump back to the external world. If I were using psychological descriptions, and that's fair enough, this might help some of you see it. This is reflected out in the city, that is, out in the external world, that those apparently in charge, or that have some control over an area, external, like a king, and the full ramifications of that. Not only the pomp and the ceremony, but a kind of distance, a kind of mystery. Even if you walked into another kingdom, into another country, that you know anything about it, and there it is, you're in Albania, and they say, here is the king of Albania. And he's up there on a throne, he's up there come in with a carriage, just whatever it is, and they're the people. This is not psychological, it sounds like it, but there is a cellular, there's a molecular basis for this. You would be struck, you would be impressed by the king of Albania, whereas in theory, you might find the whole idea and concept of Albania to be a laugh. Them and their plaster duck. But if you were there and they brought out the king of Albania and brought him through the room or through a street where you're standing, you would be impressed. You should know that. You couldn't help it. There would be a feeling. And a part of it is that he's unapproachable. You don't walk up and say, hi, king, how's it going, baby? Even in a country that you're not familiar with, that you got no respect for. But look what goes on internally in you. The minions, the fig brains, trash, people that hang around court end up making decisions, almost treating the king as a figurehead, almost tolerating him. That's not the way to operate. That's not the way to constitute change. That is not the way to exercise what apparently many people, or let's say all of you actually want, is the feeling that you've got some control over what you're doing. Give you a little update so I can drag it somewhere else. Several nights ago, I pointed out to you that since I've been using these pictures and terms and paradigms and allegories concerning a revolution, I point out that the external revolutions are notorious failures. Just notorious. Now, you've had several weeks, anybody that cared to pursue that. Tell me now, I'll give you an update and drag in some more of the things I have said since my initial mention of that. notoriously true that revolutions on all parts of the planet at all times are notorious failures. It seems so. But let me point out to you that these apparent failures are yet another case of misdiagnosis. Even though you remember the way I described it a little bit, it just seems true. I use examples of Russia, China, that they continue to talk about the revolution, such as Russia, the continuing revolution, that the people must always be in a constant state of revolution, to be alive, to be growing, whereas probably compared to Albania, Russia is conservative. And so by that appearance there would seem to be no doubt that the revolutions, time and time again, are failures. May I suggest to you yet another case of misdiagnosis? Since I've been using that term, let me even attempt to refine it. Misexpectations. So it's misdiagnoses and misexpectations that makes the external revolutions appear to be notorious failures. But it is a misdiagnosis in that ordinarily the revolutions do not actually intend to offer new freedom. As long as I'm here, let me tell you what freedom is. Everybody debates that and argues that about as much as they do sin. Freedom is the release right then of unwanted domination. Now, that's not as obvious as you may think it is. That's all freedom is. The ordinary revolutions do not actually intend, life does not have it wired up and arranged, that it's going to offer some release from unwanted domination. It's not going to give some new degree of freedom. And all the promises that all revolutions must make, they got to talk. They got to talk to the people. They got to talk to themselves. Everything that the revolutions promise are euphemisms. And they're euphemisms for this. What life is saying through the burgeoning revolutions is this. That I, we'll use it singular if there's a revolutionist somewhere, that I will replace the present domination with my domination. In that, they all succeed. In that, there is no revolution that fails. If a revolutionist usurps the sitting power, that is success. Because one dominant figure, one source of domination, that is, a new actor is on the stage to the audience of that people's, to that country, to that tribe. And they always promise all kinds of freedom. That is, the great positive change. But it's simple misdiagnosis. Because all their promises, whether they seem to be based upon economics, based upon political, civil rights, they're all euphemisms. Because the promise is always the same. Because that's what life intends. And the promise is, I will replace the present domination, the actor on stage, our dominant figure, the one whose job I want. I will replace the present domination with my domination. So if he takes power, all revolutions are notorious successes. It is the misexpectation, though, from the inability, from life's lack of need, of course, but then it seems to translate into the inability for people, the people, to be able to translate the code. They do not understand that everything that everybody says is a euphemism. So we have this great case of more misexpectations. So it appears that, hey, I thought if I helped you get in, or if at least I didn't go against you, that things would get better. And they hadn't changed a bit. From my view, they're a little worse. And now the revolutionist that's on the throne, Jesus. You do not understand the reasons involved. Of course, once he's on the throne, I'm being magnanimous. He doesn't tolerate questions like that. Only a trashy sort would come up to a now king and want to talk to him about reasons. No, he's not going to tolerate that. Once you've arrived, who the hell cares how you got there? The king don't care, and he sure as hell don't care for you asking. And he sure will not listen to a question like that more than once. Remember, there's many and several things I have mentioned about contrasts over the last few weeks. Let me point to you here a great, and maybe the great, but I don't really want to commit myself. But I promise you this, a great misexpectation. I don't know if I'll ever be able to top this one, so it may organically grow into the great expectation. I guess I'm getting dangerously close to plagiarism there with that title. That's right, I can whip Charles Dickens, though. A great misexpectation. Are you ready? Really, this is great. The difference between what men are made to say they expect and what they get. Right now, if we were really more Vegas, it would be a good time for Vic Damone or someone to kind of bring it up a little and to start singing That's Life. But that is a supreme, I'm still close to saying the supreme misexpectation. When I say man, I'm talking about every swinging dick on this planet, every human being. That a great misexpectation. The difference between what men, everybody, are made to say they expect and then what they actually get. No time restraints on that. It's over and over and over and over. God, what a contrast. What a misexpectation. What greater contrast. Think. Take it from the highest, broadest level you want to of the kind of mass expectations that large groups, nations, religions say they have, down to you. If you want to talk about contrast, what is a greater contrast than what you are made to say that you expect, and then what you actually get over and over and over and over and over? And of course, over and over and over and over and over, humanity is going and hollering out about what? Fairness. We're at an opportune place to stop and turn the tape over, and when we come back, I have a minor surprise. Or perhaps to some of you, I know to some of you, it will be a pleasant surprise. So stay tuned. Is Vic Damone here? Or how about John Gary? Is he around? Jerry Vale? Not Don Ho. Since many of you seem to enjoy some of these minor curios, I have another that I guess the little intro that I wrote will be explanation enough, will be preface enough. We'll look at it as just a perhaps momentary, perhaps pleasant, passing curio.
The revolutionist code of conduct. In the city, the expected conduct of the people is well established, while those who would aspire to revolutionary status are left without a parallel structure. Thus, for a moment of caprice and whimsy, let us imagine there is a revolutionist code of conduct for his or her observable affairs, an insurgent's guide of external etiquette. And in such an amusement, I would suggest the following for inclusion. Act as though the world is big enough for everyone. Don't sweat unless you're smiling. Act alert and appear interested. Speak less than those with whom you are speaking. Always be the first to say hello and goodbye. Don't slouch. Do not talk about money. Always appear to be involved in some deliberate activity, or else totally at ease. Do not put your name on possessions. Always wear your armor, and under it, your camouflage outfit. Don't make fist unless you're ready to strike someone. Act as though you don't know the word envy. Don't ask for or accept credit. Avoid publicity. You can appear ordinary, but not common. Don't be uncomfortable. Shed the appearance of being a consumer of any sort. Don't comment on the failures of any institutions. Have no photographs of yourself. If you must deal with relatives, treat them like foreign dignitaries. Don't talk solemnly with solemn people. Adopt a personal code of quietness. Don't comment on or compliment people's possessions. If you have ordinary habits, keep them from public view as much as possible. Do not deal in verbal fad words and phrases. Drive slow. Act completely confident under all circumstances. Never let them see you confused or hesitant. Do not correct people. If you suspect that you may have to subsequently apologize for some particular behavior, don't behave. If possible, do not wear a watch or carry a wallet. Never appear hungry. Do not raise your voice and never shout. Appear reasonably kind. Never show your wounds or point out your deformities. In no way acknowledge the existence of enemies. Dress with the latest fads only if you can pull it off correctly. Never mention your health. Although there is little really worth buying, There is no need to appear cheap. And this does not necessarily apply to one's personal, private hobbies. Never reveal your place of birth or reply intelligibly to inquiries regarding your religion. Try to interfere with people becoming impressed by you. At the very least, keep them from saying so. Never say anything about your education, and never mention your family or car. Appear neither insecure nor condescending. Don't let them talk you into anything you got to be talked into. Be simple and direct. Never mention habits abandoned or sights seen. Pick up after yourself and do not leave a visible trail. Try not to buy new stuff. Refer to your present abode as your house, never your home. Let no one hear you whine or complain. Be judicious with any use of euphemisms, and do not speak in metaphors when you intend the literal. Never be cynical, sarcastic, or rude to anyone. Don't consort with any group, organization, or institution. Use of euphemisms. And do not speak in metaphors when you intend the literal. Never be cynical, sarcastic, or rude to anyone. Don't consort with any group, organization, or institution. Move smoothly, or don't move at all. Remember, secrecy is good taste. That's all you need to know. Smile at everything. Show no interest in fake, that is, city notions of elegance. While still being civil and courteous, remember that it is city dwellers who are bothered with status and the impression they make. The revolutionist cannot be concerned with what others may think of him, and act suitable only for lesser dogs in a pact.
It has been said that from their moment of birth, all creatures, all beings, and may I throw in all organizations, which man is an organization of molecules. And so, including that, it has been noted that all creatures, beings, and organizations, from their moment of birth, have within them the seeds of their own destruction. That's something I read. I didn't make that up. From one rather non-metaphysical view, of course, that's obvious that everything that is born is already beginning to die. But let us assume that they meant something a bit more metaphorical. That's why I quoted it more or less as some of the versions I have read throughout history, that all creatures, beings, and I throw in now organizations, have within them from their moment of birth their own seeds, or the seeds for their own destruction. At any rate, that should strike all of you by now that, yeah, why not? That could be true. That probably is true. But if it is true, then I've got a question for you. That is, what does that say about man's potential creativity? What does that say about man's own potential growth? If man, being an collection, an organization of these molecular structures, and that they have within them, speaking now, and man, the organization of these molecular structures, from the moment of birth has within him the seeds of destruction, what does that say about the whole dream of change, of growth? I had a feeling nobody was going to like that. That's all right, I came prepared. Since I'm a Boy Scout, we'll just move right along. I knew I was going to have trouble with that one. Even though here it is, almost a new year, I just knew that you people would not cooperate. Ye of old holiday tunnel vision. All right, let me tell you something else about organizations. Again, including the molecular structure of man. The organizations, while they have a lifespan, as any other creature or being, they must protect themselves not only from flagrant failure, but they must protect themselves also from too much success. As in empires becoming bloated, pregnant with power when they reach an apogee of success and power, and then they internally collapse. Or a company becomes bloated with success to such a degree that the very kinds of services that brought about their success is now prohibited by their size. They can no longer offer the services and the attention to their customers, and success turns into bankruptcy. Religions. A religion will rise and take over power over large parts of the world, and then begin to commit a form of suicide by schisms. There is, in every true sense of the 3D description, an inherent danger, and it oftentimes comes to pass, of too much success being as fatal to an organization as failure is. But organizations of all sorts, including man, operate with a heightened sense of efficiency while they're threatened. Nations by their neighbors, companies by competition, religion by encroaching infidels, by opposing religions. Man, it would seem on an individual level, is threatened by the general pressures of simply being alive. Now, as much as you people believe, and as much as I intended at the time, to badmouth suffering And having told you such things as that if you stayed here long enough, that you fell into a general category, that is, of those whose suffering card I had invalidated. And as much as I have laughed and kicked and poked fun at self-pity, all forms of suffering, people enjoying reading everything from novels to newspapers about bad news, and people believing we're going to destroy ourselves. Was that some exception? That was finally some way in which man has gone awry? That there is a flaw in the evolutionary process? That everyone except us, everyone except real revolutionists are wasting their time, to say the very least, just absolutely wasting their time, always worrying about what the hell's going on, and we're going to pollute our rivers and streams, or we're going to blow ourselves up with atomic bombs, and I go, Jesus, forget all that shit. Come on, folks, it's time for little continuing bouts of epiphany, is it not? Even because I pointed out how true and correct it seems. You know it's not. If it was, I wouldn't have told you. One of the reasons, not psychological, one of the reasons, talking about a molecular level, that men apparently love to think, talk, and dwell on the problems that would seem to threaten not only their health, but perhaps their survival, is the contrast. It is a heightened sense of efficiency. People sitting around worrying about, discussing, all the way from bricklayers, whichever part of the spectrum you may still think that you find to be the most foolish. Bricklayers sitting around half drunk out of their mind in some cheap bar somewhere, discussing what may be going on with the Russians, and I never would trust those damn communists. And you could be looking in on this and going, my, what folly, what silliness. All the way from that to we could have some kind of big conference with scientists, and thinkers, and philosophers, and all dressed up, and apparently sober. And they're having this great discussion about the kinds of negative spillover of technology that threatens to pollute our world to such a degree that we're going to destroy the living environs of the spaceship Earth. And it all sounds to be the same. That to a nice big old fat woman with a six-pack underarm and 2 or 3 kids in the checkout line, and she picks up the National Enquirer, and it says, "New discovery, oxygen causes cancer." You go, wow. And then it lists some of the other articles. Listening to Frank Sinatra causes cancer. Oh, wow. Watching TV absolutely produces cancer, especially if you're the least bit overweight. Go, wow. So if you were there somewhere looking in, you could think, how silly. People just love to suffer. And boy, I sure am glad I met you-know-who, because he's pointed out to me, I used to worry about some of that stuff, and now I don't worry about nothing. And plus I realize that it's all foolishness for the rest of the world to worry about stuff. No, it's not. No. It gives a heightened sense of efficiency. Look how much fun you had. Let's say that some of you have done things, that all of you have done something since you got involved with this that you'd never done. Whatever it was. I got you roller skating for the first time, or jumping out of an airplane, or going out in public and doing something. On one of my excursions, and you went and did something that you would have never ever done. The feeling of jumping out of a plane, the feeling of going up to somebody and saying, the feeling that when you're through, well, it's the whole thing. If we're going, let's just right quick, a red circuit level. Of doing something new and exciting, trying to climb a mountain, trying to rappel down a mountain, going out rafting, going up in a hot air balloon. The feeling, just that heightened feeling of being alive and you can't help smiling and grinning. Yeah. I got through it. I was scared to death. I didn't think I could do it and all that. You know what that is by now. That, I am telling you now, is a part. It is a molecular part. It is cellular voices talking, that it is not just foolishness of humans sitting around everywhere discussing the potential destruction of us all. Well, everybody knows they're going to die. Everybody knows they might get sick. And the whole jokes about more and more things seem to cause cancer, that helps give a sense of heightened awareness of being alive. It gives a heightened degree of efficiency to worry about it. That we could be killing ourselves. We might blow the planet up. And just because I point out to you that's not true, that does not mean this is not serving a purpose. Because it is. I was going to throw in one more thing, and again we've run out of words. And so I'm going to say serenity, and I mean something else. But I'm going ahead and use that word. All right, real serenity, willful serenity, revolutionary serenity. All right? Real serenity is a revolutionary's game. Serenity is not a game that they play in the city, and it never will be. It's not supposed to be. If in some way, I don't know whether I have to do this anymore. I was going to say, if in some way I could speak to people in the city, large groups of the general public, and say, hey, I can show you very quickly some little things to do, and it will produce in you. You can do it for yourself. Real serenity. Not this worrying about that watching TV may give me cancer, and that being a little overweight I might die 30 minutes early. Jesus. That I can tell you some little things to do, and that if you continue to do them, remember to do it, and will produce serenity. If I could do that to people and they would accept it and say, yeah, I want it, it would not be a boon to them. It would not. And of course, if this is an act being, it couldn't happen. But if I did it far enough, it would not be simply a non-boon to them. It would begin to wreck the whole structure of human existence. Serenity is a game only to be played by a few people. Because the rest of what seems to be self-pity, self-doubt, insecurity, uncertainty, specific fears, as foolish as I can make them sound, that watching TV may give you cancer, all the way from that to just the general vague foreboding of being alive. The pressure, the older I get, I'm beginning to ache and I'm beginning to get stiff, and sometimes I wake up in the morning and my eyes won't open and focus good. Or sometimes I just feel like, Jesus, now here I am, 45, 50. It's like the whole thing's falling apart. That kind of feeling. There's nothing to laugh at. It produces a heightened sense of efficiency in life. And people are doing what they should do. They are operating very efficiently to whine, to complain, to worry about, from one view, from many views, to worry about shit that don't mean shit. Or to worry about shit that nobody can do anything about. But you make a gross mistake to think that they're making a grave mistake. It is efficiency. Should I point out the obvious? Why not? A real revolutionist has not only got to learn how to use the heightening potential of just general run-of-the-mill threats, pressures, forebodings that are common to everybody's life, because it's common to your cellular structure. It's common down there. You've got to not only learn how to use those, but if necessary, here comes the obvious, you've got to seek it out, and if that's not sufficient, you got to learn how to produce that kind of tension, that kind of apparent threat, to keep yourself at a peak of operating efficiency. If not, you're just sitting around. You may be sitting around here. You may be sitting around what seems to be some unusual floating force field of energy, to wit, all the combined people that you're around here and in other cities, and as much as you can pick up from me on tape. But it's not simply a matter of trying to avoid the tensions in life, the pressures in life. What I would really prefer to leave you with is the term the threats, because that's what it feels like. And that's the term I started out with this verbal sketch tonight, that organizations operate with heightened efficiency when threatened. Corporations do, institutions do, religions do. That there is the sense of a continuing, an ongoing threat. Chrysler, Iacocca, the threat, we're about to fall apart. It creates a sense, an operating sense, in many cases, of heightened efficiency from threats. And you are no different. You have the eternal impending threat, and that is that you could die tonight. But then that is almost unreal to people, that is not the kind of threat that the yellow circuits, that ordinary consciousness can conceive of as being, not only it can't conceive of as being a continuing threat, but it can't really conceive of it as being a threat over momentary lapses. You just can't live with that. And so it then comes out in other ways that there are threats. There are threats, I may lose my job, I may lose my position in life, which is real common in the city. I'll lose my hierarchy in the pack. But it seems to be important in the city. That's not the way they look at it. It's why I threw in the final one as far as this, if I were going with it anymore, that facetious, of course, somewhat whimsical code of revolutionary conduct, if there was such a thing. But at the end, if you notice, I pointed out that it's, in the city, it is of supreme importance. And it seems to be social, it seems to be psychological, it's cellular. But the concern over status, the concern over what do people think of me, that is the greatest threat in the city. Now, it comes out in other ways. It comes out that I have, certainly at a cellular level, there's the threat that I may go hungry. As I point out, in our time, our place in this planet, that's almost impossible. The fear that I may not be loved, the fear that I may not have a place to live tonight. But almost all those fears, once you get past hunger, once you get past sex, the fear comes out as like a loss of stature, a loss of status, a loss as to what other people, what I perceive that they think about me, the way they treat me. And it seems to be of importance. And as I said, if we were actually leaving this at, obviously, what to ordinary people would appear to be a psychological level, a sociological level, anything you want to call it, that apparently we're talking about something very unique to man. Now they got me saying very unique. Something unique to man, and something that might be open to some investigation, that is, some correction, that it might be a flaw here. And it's not. It is a molecular, cellular need. But it is not on the basis, it is a misdiagnosis, I'm telling you again, a misexpectation, that it seems to be something worthy of a civilized, intelligent person's attention. That is, that I should be concerned, what do my fellow humans think about me? Especially my betters. But at least my neighbors, what do they think about me? You know, should I change deodorants? Should I change mouthwash and get a better one? Should I get a new car? Are they looking at me because my car is getting too old in the neighborhood? Should I perhaps lean on my children a little more so that they're not so disruptive out in the neighborhood? I've noticed some of my neighbors looking at my children and kind of turning their lip up and then looking at me. And all that seems to be what could amount to, or could have fiscal ramifications. What does my boss think about me? Last time I invited him over, and my wife burned the meal. I wonder how he likes the furniture we've got. Can he tell I bought most of it at Sears? All that seems to have many psychological, sociological ramifications and bases. And it does not. It is no more than the act of lesser dogs in a goddamn pack worrying about the hierarchy. That I am being dominated, but who else is going to dominate me? How many levels of domination do I have to put up with? Who might I dominate? Am I going to lose my place in the pecking order, and the few people I can push around, I'm going to lose that? That is a concern for status. That is the driving force after we're talking about food and sex in the city. And none of you, surely, now that I got you to this point, if you're listening, would be so foolish as right now if I said, let's have a vote, who of you no longer has any concern what anybody thinks? None of you would dare raise your goddamn hand, would you? Like I'm free from it. But I'm telling you what, it is what seems to be reasons, what seems to be motivations that is absolutely unworthy of a revolutionist. They are basic, they are there, it's the cells talking, but if you take that as being your motivation, there reaches a point, and it's not, I started to say it's not absolute, but hell, you're getting big and grown. It is absolute after a certain point. That if you let the molecular voices speak to you and you listen to them on the basis of my status in the pecking order, what anybody thinks of me, what my mother thinks of me, what the president would think of me if he was here, or if you were Catholic, if the Pope was here, what my neighbors think, what humanity in general thinks, how do I appear? There will come a point with some of you, it'll get that far, I'm sure, that it almost loses its relative ad hoc nature. That you've got to see that you cannot tolerate those voices. You cannot listen to them, period, because they do conflict. It doesn't mean that you necessarily didn't have to start running around nude and let your hair all grow out and never take a bath. You know I'm not saying that, but you understand that I have been listening, and it's still going on to a large degree to the voices at the cellular level. And I took it as being something else. I took it as being that these voices have some importance, and in fact, I should go along with some of this, that it in fact coincides, if not supports, my revolutionary desire, my desire to change and grow, and it does not. All it is protection of your pecking order. It is protection of the mechanical hierarchy of the city. That everybody's cellular collection that's been put together, and now it looks like you, was born into a certain dance routine, was born into a strata somewhere in the city. But it is no more than the pecking order of wild dogs, of rats, monkeys. But it comes out another way. That is the defense, not underarm odor, not bad breath. That is the defense of the bourgeoisie. That is the defense of the status quo, of the bell curve of the city. It is the driving defense mechanism for humanity as a whole, not the extreme ends of any spectrum, but what holds it all together. If you think you have any hero in the world, maybe let me try it this way, and you know that I don't mean this as literal as it sounds. If you had any hero in the world, historical, contemporary, and if you can right now, if I ask you, can you imagine your hero, whoever it was, having any concern? I'm not talking about some kind of mechanical bravado of somebody saying, well, I don't care. In his little heart of hearts, in his little mind of minds, can you really conceive of your hero having any concern? Not being oblivious to it, he would certainly be aware of it, but having any concern over what other people thought of him. Any. Now down in his cellular level, I don't care what you think you're talking about Moses or Jesus or Buddha, back at the cellular level, his cells are protecting their place in the mechanical hierarchy in the pack. They got to. If you're alive, they are. But I'm saying, can you believe, can you picture your hero actually entertaining it and listening, not hearing it, but listening to any voices saying, well, what might they think of me if I do this or if I say this? If you can, mark another hero off. Because if you still think he's a hero, you're a bigger asshole than he was. There I go again. You're as common as he was. Strike that off the tape. That's too much. I got no business calling people that. But it's hard to get people's attention if you just point out that this could be a slight misdiagnosis here. Well, on that semi-high note, you're not going to make me do what I did last time with that kind of silly ending. I think we'll leave it.